Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of Isabella Rossi, a young waitress who thought no one noticed her little midnight dance in an empty cafe. She was wrong, because the man who saw her that night wasn't just any man. He was Matteo Santoro, the quiet, dangerous king of the city's underworld, a man who could destroy anyone with a single phone call. But that night, he didn't want destruction. He wanted her. It was almost midnight when Isabella twisted the cafe's open sign to closed and exhaled the heavy air of a long day. The other staff had already gone home. Outside, the streets of Rome gleamed wet from the late rain, lights reflecting in puddles like molten gold. Inside, the cafe smelled of espresso and cinnamon. Warm, comforting, lonely. She turned the radio up a little, soft jazz, playful, swinging, and began wiping the counter. Her hips swayed gently with the rhythm. A quiet hum escaped her lips. Then, for no reason at all, she spun. Just one spin, quick and graceful, her hair catching the golden light as her skirt flared. It made her laugh, a sound that broke the silence like sunlight through glass. If anyone had seen her, she would have blushed to death. But she thought she was alone. She wasn't. In the corner near the glass door, a man stood watching. He hadn't meant to stop. Matteo Santoro never stopped anywhere. His schedule was precise, his movements calculated. But as his car passed the cafe, the sight of the woman inside, dancing alone, eyes closed, utterly unguarded, had pulled at something buried deep in him. Something he hadn't felt in years. So he told his driver to wait, and he walked in. Isabella didn't notice him at first, not until the chime above the door startled her mid-spin. She froze, cheeks flushed. "Oh, I'm sorry, we're closed." Her words faded as her eyes met his. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that somehow made the dim cafe look smaller. His presence was quiet but commanding. His gaze, cool gray under thick lashes, lingered on her a heartbeat too long. "I saw the lights," he said, voice deep and smooth, touched by a faint Italian accent that made her pulse jump. Didn't mean to interrupt. She fumbled with a towel, suddenly aware of the flower on her apron, the stray strand of hair sticking to her cheek. No, it's fine. I was just cleaning up." "And dancing," he said, the corner of his mouth curving ever so slightly. Her face burned. "You saw that?" "Every step." His tone wasn't teasing. It was admiring, almost reverent. "You dance beautifully." "It wasn't dancing," she said quickly, trying to laugh it off. "Just tired feet and too much music." "Sometimes those are the best dances," he murmured. The silence that followed was oddly charged. She tried to regain control of the moment. "If you'd like a coffee, I can make one. The machine's still warm." Matteo's eyes held hers. Coffee would be perfect. She nodded, grateful for the distraction, and turned to the espresso machine. Behind her, she could feel his gaze, steady, unreadable. She tried to ignore how her hands trembled slightly as she tamped the grounds, pressed the button, watched dark liquid pour into porcelain. "You work here often?" he asked, his voice a low hum behind her. "Most nights," she said, glancing back with a smile. "Someone has to keep the city caffeinated. Long hours for little pay." She shrugged. "It's honest work." He tilted his head, studying her. "Honest? That's rare," the machine hissed. She turned, handing him the cup. Their fingers brushed, a spark, quick but undeniable. "Thank you," he said, his gaze lingering on her face before he sipped. "Perfect," she laughed softly. "Flattery won't get you a free refill." "I'm not trying to flatter you, signorina," he said. "I'm just telling the truth." Something in the way he said it made her heart thump. His voice wasn't loud, yet it filled the room. "I'm Matteo," he added after a moment. "Isabella," she replied. "Bella," he repeated slowly, letting the name roll on his tongue. It sounded different coming from him, deeper, heavier, as though he owned the sound of it. They spoke for a while. Simple things. How long she'd worked there, what she studied before she had to quit, how the city never really sleeps. She didn't realize until later how much he'd made her talk, how easily he'd drawn out her laughter, her small truths. When he finally rose to leave, she felt the air change. "Thank you for the coffee," he said, setting down his cup. "And for the dance." I told you it wasn't. It was, he interrupted gently. You just didn't know someone was watching. And then he left. The bell chimed again, and the cafe felt empty in a way it never had before. Isabella stood still for a long time, the ghost of his gaze still warming her skin. She didn't know who he was, or why she couldn't stop thinking about his voice. She didn't know that Matteo Santoro never entered any place without a reason. And that by the time he left her cafe, he had already made a decision. He wanted to see her again. And Matteo Santoro always got what he wanted. For 2 nights, Isabella couldn't stop replaying the scene in her mind. The stranger in the suit, the way he said her name like it meant something, the intensity in his eyes that both thrilled and unsettled her. She told herself he was just a customer, that she should forget it. But deep down, she knew that kind of man didn't just walk in and disappear. She was right. On the 3rd evening, as she was serving the last few customers, a small envelope appeared on the counter. Her co-worker Paolo handed it to her with a smirk. For you, Bella, delivered by some guy in a black car. Said it's important. Her heart skipped. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy paper with her name written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a single card, Villa Santoro, 9 p.m. Don't be afraid to say yes. And her hands trembled slightly. Villa Santoro was legendary. An estate on the city's edge, owned by one of the richest, most secretive families in Italy. Rumors surrounded them. Business tycoons, politicians, and men whose smiles hid more than they revealed. She told herself she wouldn't go. That would be crazy. She didn't even know him. But curiosity has a way of silencing reason. At 8:50 that night, a black Maserati pulled up outside her apartment. The driver, dressed in black, stepped out and opened the door for her. Miss Rossi? Her heart thudded. Yes. Mr. Santoro is expecting you. She almost said no. Almost. But something inside her, something that wanted to know who he really was, whispered go. The drive was silent except for the low hum of the engine and the rain tapping on the windows. When the car finally stopped before a gated villa surrounded by tall cypress trees, Isabella felt a shiver. The place looked more like a fortress than a home. The front doors opened as she approached. A butler in a dark suit nodded respectfully. Mr. Santoro will see you in the conservatory. She followed him through marble halls filled with art, the soft sound of a piano echoing in the distance. The scent of amber and tobacco lingered faintly in the air. When she stepped into the conservatory, she saw him, Matteo, standing near a grand piano, one hand resting casually on a glass of red wine. He was wearing a dark turtleneck instead of a suit, but he looked just as intimidating. You came, he said simply, his lips curving into a small smile. I almost didn't, she admitted. He raised an eyebrow. But you did. That says something. Maybe that I'm reckless. Maybe that you're curious. He gestured toward a chair. Sit. I don't bite. That sounds like something a man who does bite would say, she murmured, but sat anyway. He chuckled, a rare, genuine sound that made her stomach flip. You're braver than I thought. And you're more mysterious than anyone has a right to be. Their eyes met, the tension between them growing heavier with every heartbeat. Matteo poured her a glass of wine. I don't usually invite strangers to my home, but I wanted to see you again. Why? He studied her for a moment. Because when I walked into that cafe, I saw someone who wasn't pretending. Everyone in my world wears a mask. You didn't, and I can't stop thinking about that. His honesty caught her off guard. You don't even know me. I know enough. You work hard, you're kind, and you dance when no one's watching. Her cheeks flushed. That was nothing. It wasn't nothing to me. The sincerity in his tone left her speechless. For a few moments, they sat in silence, the soft piano music filling the air. Matteo seemed lost in thought, his eyes distant. Then he spoke again, his voice quieter. You should know who I am, Isabella. It's only fair. Her chest tightened. Who are you? He hesitated, as if choosing between two truths. I run a business that keeps this city running. Some call it construction. Some call it politics, others use uglier words. She frowned. What kind of business? He met her gaze, unflinching. The kind that requires loyalty and discretion. The kind that sometimes involves risk, and the kind that doesn't allow many friends. It wasn't a confession. but it was close enough. Isabella understood immediately what he wasn't saying. "You're dangerous," she whispered. A faint smile ghosted over his lips. "To some people. Not to you. How can you be sure?" "Because if I meant you harm, you wouldn't be sitting here." His tone was calm, matter of fact, and yet there was no menace in it. Just quiet certainty. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt seen. "I should go," she said, standing abruptly. This was a mistake. Matteo rose too, his expression unreadable. "If you want to leave, I won't stop you. But something tells me you'll come back. People always do when they find a place they didn't know they were missing." "Don't be so sure," she said. But her voice wavered. He walked her to the door, keeping a polite distance. As the butler reappeared, Matteo spoke softly. "Bella." She turned. "Next time you dance," he said, "don't hide it. The world needs more people who still remember how." Her throat tightened. She couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a warning. That night, lying in bed, Isabella couldn't sleep. Matteo's words echoed in her head, his voice sliding into her dreams. She told herself she wouldn't see him again. She told herself she was too smart for that. But deep down, she already knew she'd lost that battle, because something about the way he'd looked at her, like she was light in a world full of darkness, had left a mark she couldn't erase. And what she didn't know was that outside, across the street, a black car idled quietly. Matteo's driver sat inside, watching her window, waiting for the boss's call. Matteo never left anything to chance, not even her. Days passed, but Isabella couldn't shake him from her mind. Every time the cafe door opened, her heart leapt, half expecting to see him again. But Matteo Santoro didn't just appear twice without reason, and yet, one rainy afternoon, he did. The cafe was busy, filled with the low hum of conversation and the hiss of milk steaming. Isabella was wiping a table when the air suddenly shifted, quieter, heavier. When she turned, he was there, seated in the corner booth, reading a newspaper. Two men in dark suits lingered discreetly near the door, pretending to be ordinary customers. Her chest tightened. He shouldn't be here. She approached cautiously, forcing a smile. "We're all out of miracles today, Signor Santoro. Can I offer you coffee instead?" He looked up from the paper, his lips curling faintly. "Just Matteo, please. And yes, your coffee, not the miracle, is exactly why I came." "You came all this way for caffeine?" She teased, trying to sound unaffected. "For conversation," he corrected. "And maybe company." Their eyes met. The world seemed to fade for a heartbeat. She poured him an espresso and sat across from him, breaking every cafe rule she knew. "You don't strike me as the type who needs company." "I don't," he said quietly, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "But I find myself wanting it lately." Her heart fluttered before she caught herself. "You shouldn't be here. People talk." "Let them," he said, voice soft but edged with authority. "You're safe with me." "I'm not sure that's the point," she replied. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, lowering his voice. "The point, Bella, is that I like seeing you, and I don't like being told what I should or shouldn't do." There it was again, that mix of gentleness and danger that both unnerved and fascinated her. He stayed for nearly an hour, asking her about her dreams, her family, her favorite books. He listened like no one ever had. But as she spoke, she noticed subtle details. The way people glanced his way and quickly looked down, the respectful nods from men passing outside. Even Paolo, her co-worker, avoided his table like it was holy ground. When Matteo finally left, he slipped a small black card onto the counter. "If you ever need help," he said, "call this number, day or night." She looked down. No name, just a number printed in silver. When she glanced up again, he was gone. That night, as she locked up, she told herself to throw the card away. But she didn't. She slid it into her wallet like a secret she wasn't ready to destroy. The next few weeks blurred into quiet confusion. Matteo appeared again, then disappeared for days. Sometimes he'd come for coffee, other times just to talk. He never crossed lines. But there was always an invisible thread between them. One she couldn't cut. One he quietly controlled. Once he arrived after closing, The cafe was empty except for her and the faint glow of the streetlights. "You shouldn't walk home alone this late," he said, appearing at the door as if he'd been waiting outside. "I'm fine," she said, locking the register. "I'm sure you are, but humor me." He offered his hand. "Are you always this protective of your baristas?" she asked, half teasing. "Only the ones who dance when they think no one's watching." She hesitated, then took his hand. His fingers were warm, strong, steady. The contact sent a rush through her chest. He walked her home without speaking much, his steps unhurried, his presence grounding. When they reached her door, she turned to thank him, but his eyes caught hers, and the world seemed to hold its breath. "I shouldn't get used to this," she whispered. "Maybe you should," he murmured. He leaned closer, not to kiss her, but to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered for just a second too long. "Good night, Bella." It was the softest command she'd ever heard. When he left, she stood frozen in her doorway, heart thundering. She didn't see the car parked at the end of the street, or the man inside watching them through the rain-streaked windshield. 2 nights later, the cafe's front window shattered. Isabella screamed as glass exploded across the floor. A brick rolled to her feet, wrapped in a note. "Stay away from him." Police came and went. Paolo insisted it was random vandalism, but Isabella knew better. Fear gripped her chest. She didn't even think. She grabbed her phone, pulled out Matteo's card, and dialed the number. He answered after the first ring. "Bella?" Her voice trembled. Someone attacked the cafe. Are you hurt?" "No, but stay where you are. I'm on my way." Minutes later, headlights cut through the rain. Matteo stepped out of the car, his presence swallowing the chaos around them. He didn't speak at first, just took in the shattered glass, the trembling in her hands. Then he turned to his men. "Find out who did this!" His voice was low, lethal. The air changed. He moved closer to her, cupping her shoulders gently. "You should have called me sooner. I didn't want to bother you. You could never bother me." There was something in his eyes, fury and worry, tangled together. She felt her fear ebb, replaced by something dangerous. Trust. "Come with me," he said quietly. "What?" "Just for tonight. You're not safe here." Her breath caught. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they'll never touch you." She hesitated. Logic screamed no, but when he extended his hand again, she took it. Because when Matteo Santoro looked at you like that, saying no felt impossible. As his car pulled away from the cafe, Isabella watched her world shrink in the rearview mirror, unaware that she had just crossed an invisible line. From this point on, nothing in her life would ever be the same. The drive felt endless. Rain traced silver lines down the tinted windows as the city faded into darkness. Matteo sat beside her, silent, his profile sharp in the flicker of passing streetlights. "Where are we going?" Isabella finally asked, her voice small in the hum of the engine. He turned slightly toward her. "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer." His lips curved faintly. "You'll see soon." She wanted to press further but couldn't find the words. Everything about him, his stillness, his control, the quiet authority that seemed to shape the air around him, made questions feel futile. After half an hour, the car turned down a narrow, tree-lined road. Iron gates opened soundlessly ahead, revealing a villa illuminated by soft golden light. It was beautiful but intimidating, too quiet, too perfect. The car stopped beneath an archway. A man in a black suit opened her door, murmuring, "Buonasera, signorina." Matteo gestured for her to follow. "Come." The villa's interior was a symphony of marble, glass, and low-lit elegance. Classical music drifted faintly from another room. The scent of cedar and old books filled the hall. "This is your house?" Isabella whispered, taking it all in. "One of them," he said casually. "You'll stay here until I'm sure it's safe." "Matteo, I can't—" He stopped, turning to face her. "Bella, whoever threw that brick wasn't sending a message to the cafe. They were sending it to me. You were the easiest way to reach me. That makes this my responsibility." His gaze was steady, protective in a way that made her chest tighten. "I don't even understand what you're involved in," she said quietly. "Then don't try to," he replied. "For now, just trust me." He led her through the hall to a guest room overlooking the rain-soaked gardens. It was more luxurious than any hotel she'd ever seen. Silk sheets, soft lighting, a balcony with a view of the city lights below. "If you need anything," he said, "my staff will bring it. There's food, clothes, anything you want." She stared at him. "This feels surreal, like I've stepped into someone else's life." Mateo's expression softened. "Maybe you just stepped into mine." He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Get some rest, Bella. You're safe here." After he left, Isabella stood by the window, watching the rain blur the reflection of her face. Safe, he had said, but the silence of the villa felt too heavy, too alert. Somewhere downstairs, she heard the faint murmur of men's voices, guards maybe. She touched the curtains, fingers trembling slightly. For the first time, she wondered if safe meant something different in Mateo's world. She didn't sleep much that night. Sometime after midnight, she heard footsteps outside her door. Slow, deliberate. She sat up, heart racing, until a soft knock followed. "It's me," Mateo's voice came through the wood. She hesitated, then opened the door. He stood there, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly tousled, less like a mafia boss, more like a man carrying the weight of an empire. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." "I can't sleep," she admitted. "This place feels too big, too quiet." He stepped inside, glancing around the room as if checking for shadows only he could see. "You'll get used to it. Silence is a luxury most people take for granted." "Not me," she said softly. "Where I come from, silence usually means something's wrong." He smiled faintly, but his eyes were tired. "I forget how that sounds to someone who hasn't lived this life." "This life?" He hesitated. Then, instead of explaining, he walked to the window beside her. "You see that line of light on the horizon?" he asked, nodding toward the faint glow where the city began. "That's my boundary. Everything beyond it belongs to someone else. And in my world, crossing boundaries can get you killed." She shivered. "And I'm inside that boundary now." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment the mask slipped. "Yes," he said quietly. "You are." They stood there for a long time, the rain whispering against the glass, their reflections blending in the dark window pane. "Why are you helping me?" she asked finally. "You could have just sent someone to fix the window." He exhaled slowly. "Because when I saw that note, I realized how close you came to being hurt because of me, and I don't let anyone pay for my mistakes. But you don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "Enough to know that if something happened to you, I wouldn't sleep again." The words hit harder than she expected. No one had ever spoken about her like that, not with such quiet certainty. "Mateo," she began, but her voice faltered. He took a step closer. The distance between them vanished, replaced by a tension that made her heartbeat echo in her ears. "I should go," he said after a moment, his voice rough. "Before I say something I can't take back." He turned to leave, but her hand brushed his arm. Instinct, not thought. "Wait," he stopped. She searched his face. The sharp lines, the weary eyes, the contradiction between danger and gentleness that defined him. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. Something shifted in his gaze, a flicker of disbelief, then something deeper, rawer. "You should be," he said. "Maybe," she replied, "but I'm not." The silence that followed was electric. He didn't move for a long time, then finally nodded, as if conceding defeat in a battle he hadn't meant to fight. "Sleep, Bella," he said quietly. "Tomorrow will be different." When he left, she stood there for several minutes, pulse still racing, wondering why every word he said felt like both a warning and a promise. And somewhere in the villa below, Mateo stood alone in his study, staring at a photograph on his desk. His brother, the man who had been killed 6 months ago in a cafe almost identical to Isabella's. He whispered to the empty room, "Not again." Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the villa, painting soft gold across the marble floors. Isabella awoke to the faint scent of coffee drifting through the air. Real Italian roast, dark and comforting. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then her eyes landed on the unfamiliar ceiling and her heart sank. The previous night replayed in her mind. The shattered cafe, Mateo's voice telling her she was inside his boundary. She rubbed her temples. How had she let herself get dragged into a world she didn't even understand? There was a soft knock. "Come in," she said cautiously. A woman entered, graceful in her 50s, dressed in a black uniform with silver buttons. "Buongiorno, signorina. I'm Lucia. Mr. Santoro asked me to see if you needed breakfast." Isabella blinked. "That's very kind. Thank you." Lucia smiled faintly. "You're welcome. He also asked me to tell you that you can explore the gardens if you wish. But please, stay inside the gates." The message was polite, but the meaning was clear. Don't wander too far. When Lucia left, Isabella stood for a moment, staring out the window. The villa grounds stretched endlessly. Fountains, olive trees, stone statues guarding pathways like silent sentinels. Beauty everywhere, but the air felt controlled, like even the flowers grew under orders. She ate breakfast quietly, pastries, fruit, coffee strong enough to make her heart race, and wandered outside. The morning breeze was cool, carrying the scent of lavender. For a moment, she almost forgot the fear. Then she saw him. Mateo was by the fountain, on his phone, voice low but tense. Even from across the courtyard, she could tell his mood had shifted. His movements were precise, his posture rigid. The conversation wasn't friendly. When he hung up, he turned, and their eyes met. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said as he approached. "I thought you said it was safe." "I did." He slipped his hands into his pockets. "But safety in my world is relative." There was something in his tone, a weariness she hadn't heard before. "Bad news?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then shook his head. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Mateo." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You keep saying that, but it keeps sounding like I should worry." He looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled. "You're right. You should, because this city doesn't forgive weakness. And last night proved someone's watching me. Watching you now, too." Her stomach tightened. "So I'm just trapped here?" He frowned slightly, as if the word offended him. "Protected. There's a difference." "To you, maybe," she said quietly. "Not to me." His expression softened, guilt flickering behind his eyes. "You have every right to be angry. You didn't choose this." "No, but you did," she said, meeting his gaze. "Whatever you're mixed up in, it found me because of you." The silence stretched between them, heavy with truth. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "I lost someone once because of this life. My brother." The admission caught her off guard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Mateo's jaw tightened. He ran the family's accounts. Thought he could handle both worlds, legitimate and not. But trust is a fragile thing here. One mistake, one rumor, and he was gone. Gone? Shot, in a cafe. His eyes darkened. "That's why when I saw your note, I couldn't ignore it." For the first time, Isabella saw past his composure, glimpsing the grief that lived beneath the calm exterior. "You blame yourself," she said softly. He didn't deny it. "When you lose enough people, you start keeping others at arm's length. Safer that way." "And yet here I am," she said. "And yet here you are." His gaze met hers, steady and intent. "And I don't know why that scares me more than anything." Her heart caught in her throat. There it was, the line between danger and desire, drawn and crossed in a single breath. He turned away almost abruptly. "I have to take care of some things in the city. You'll stay here until I return. No arguments. Mateo, please." The word came out quieter than she expected. "Don't make me worry." He left her standing by the fountain, the sound of his car fading down the long driveway. That afternoon, a storm rolled in, darkening the sky. The villa seemed to grow colder with every clap of thunder. Isabella tried reading, but her mind kept circling back to Mateo, his story, his grief, the walls he'd built. By evening, she wandered back to the conservatory. The piano stood open, its keys gleaming in the dim light. She hesitated, then sat and pressed a few soft notes. The melody was uneven, hesitant, a lullaby her mother used to hum. She didn't hear him enter. "That's beautiful," Mateo's voice came from behind her. She turned, startled. I didn't know you were back. I wanted to hear the storm from home, he said, stepping closer. And I heard music instead. I was just trying to remember something good, she said softly. He smiled faintly. You remind me what that feels like. The words lingered in the air between them, delicate and dangerous. Did you find what you were looking for in the city? She asked. Not yet, he said. But I will. The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. She stood, her pulse quickening. Matteo, when all this is over, when it's safe, what happens then? He was quiet for a long time before answering. Then you'll be free to leave. And you? He met her eyes, and for once there was no distance between them. People like me don't get free, Bella. We just get quieter. The sadness in his voice cut deeper than she expected. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. He didn't move away. They stood there, close enough to feel each other's breath. Outside, thunder rumbled softly, the sound almost protective. In that moment, Isabella realized something terrifying and undeniable. She didn't want to leave. And Matteo, though he didn't say it, was realizing something even worse. He didn't want to let her. The following morning, the storm had passed, but an uneasy stillness hung over the villa. Matteo sat in his study, surrounded by the low hum of tension that filled the room whenever his men gathered. Papers were spread across his desk. Surveillance photos, bank ledgers, lists of names circled in red ink. Luca, his most trusted lieutenant, stood opposite him, shoulders tense. It was the Caruso family, he said grimly. They're testing your boundaries again. The note left at the cafe was their warning. Matteo's jaw flexed. A warning would have been a bullet. This was a message. They're not after me, they're after her. Luca frowned. The waitress? Matteo's gaze hardened. Don't call her that. Luca hesitated, then nodded. What do you want me to do? Matteo's fingers drummed once on the desk. Find the leak. Someone inside gave them her name, her address, her schedule. That doesn't happen by accident. Luca hesitated. You think it's someone close? I think it's someone breathing, Matteo said coldly. Silence settled, heavy as gunmetal. When Luca left, Matteo leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He'd spent years building a fortress of control around his life. Every alliance, every secret, perfectly balanced. But Isabella had cracked something open in him, and now everything seemed to bleed through that fracture. He looked at the framed photo of his brother again, the one who'd died in a cafe 6 months ago. They'll try again, he muttered. They always do. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Matteo? Isabella's voice drifted through the door. He quickly swept the files into a drawer before answering. Come in. She entered hesitantly, dressed in one of the simple cotton dresses Lucia had found for her. She looked out of place in the somber office, like a splash of sunlight that didn't belong among shadows. Did I interrupt something? She asked. He smiled faintly. Just business. Your kind of business scares me, she admitted. It scares me too sometimes, he said quietly. She tilted her head, studying him. Then why do it? Because if I didn't, someone worse would. Power is like gravity here. If you let go, it crushes you. The honesty in his voice startled her. She crossed her arms. You talk like you have no choice. He gave a small, sad smile. Everyone has a choice, Bella. It's just that mine come with consequences measured in blood. Before she could answer, a phone buzzed on his desk. Matteo's expression shifted instantly, calm turning to steel. He picked it up. Speak. She couldn't hear the other voice, but she saw the color drain from his face. When? He demanded. Where? A pause. Keep him there. I'm coming. He hung up and rose, already moving toward the door. What happened? Isabella asked, alarmed. Matteo hesitated, just long enough to decide how much truth to give her. One of my men was found dead. The same signature as the brick at your cafe. They're not finished. Her stomach twisted. Then don't go. I have to, he said, softer now. This doesn't end until I make it end. He brushed past her, but she caught his arm. Matteo, please. You can't keep fighting the whole world. He turned to her, eyes dark with something between anger and despair. It's the only thing I know how to fight for. Their faces were inches apart. She could feel the heat of his breath, the pulse in his jaw. For a second, she thought he might kiss her, but instead he stepped back. "Stay here," he said. "No one comes in, no one leaves. Promise me." She nodded, her throat too tight for words. The hours that followed were endless. The villa grew quieter, shadows lengthening with every tick of the clock. Isabella sat by the window, watching the road, praying for headlights. Lucia tried to distract her with tea and calm reassurances, but even she seemed tense, glancing often toward the phone that never rang. When it finally did, the sound was sharp enough to make Isabella flinch. Lucia answered, her expression shifting. "Yes, he's back," she said after a moment, relief softening her voice. Isabella rushed downstairs. Matteo was standing in the doorway, shirt torn, knuckles bruised, a thin line of blood tracing his temple. "Oh my God!" she gasped, rushing toward him. "What happened?" He caught her hand gently, stopping her. "It's not my blood." "Then whose?" "Someone who won't bother us again." His tone was flat, final. But his eyes betrayed the exhaustion underneath. "You killed someone?" she whispered. He didn't answer. She stepped back, shaking her head. "You talk about protecting me, but this isn't protection. It's war." He moved closer, his voice low. "You think I want this life? You think I enjoy what I have to do? Every bullet, every order, it stains me. But I'll do it again if it means keeping you alive." Her eyes glistened with tears. "Why me, Matteo? Why not let me go before it's too late?" He stared at her, pain flashing across his features. "Because it's already too late." He reached for her then, pulling her close. She didn't resist this time. His arms wrapped around her, solid and desperate, as if she was the only thing anchoring him to sanity. She could feel his heart pounding against hers, could smell the rain and gunpowder on his clothes. "You shouldn't have to live like this," she whispered against his chest. "And yet here you are," he murmured, "still standing in my world." "I don't know if I belong here," she said. "Maybe you don't," he said softly, pressing his forehead against hers. "But I can't imagine it without you anymore." The confession was quiet, but it carried the weight of everything he couldn't say. He drew back just enough to look into her eyes. "Bella," he said, his voice raw, "if I can't keep you safe in this life, I'll build a new one. For you, whatever it takes." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But as thunder rolled again in the distance, she couldn't shake the feeling that love, in Matteo's world, was just another battlefield. The next morning, the villa felt tense, too quiet, too still. The men who usually guarded the hallways moved faster, their eyes sharper. Something had shifted. Matteo was in the study again, pacing. Papers covered the desk like a battlefield of secrets. Luca stood in front of him, his face pale, jaw clenched. "It was Sandro," Luca said finally. "He was the leak. We found encrypted messages on his burner phone, communications with the Caruso family. He gave them your schedules, your routes, even the cafe." Matteo froze mid-step, the muscles in his shoulders tightening. "How long?" 3 months, maybe more." "And where is he now?" Luca swallowed. "Gone. Disappeared before dawn." "We think he had help." Matteo's eyes darkened. "Then find him. And find the help." Luca nodded and left quickly. But Matteo stayed still, staring at the floor, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. Betrayal wasn't new in his world, but this one felt personal. Someone had deliberately targeted what mattered to him now. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling through clenched teeth. "They're coming for her," he muttered. Upstairs, Isabella sat on the balcony, trying to breathe in the morning air. The world outside the gates seemed deceptively peaceful, birds chirping, sunlight painting the gardens gold. But she could feel it, even from here, the tension that rippled through the villa like an invisible current. When Lucia brought her breakfast, Isabella asked, "Where's Matteo?" "In his study," Lucia said carefully. "He's dealing with business." "Business," Isabella repeated. The word had become a synonym for violence. She hesitated, then set her coffee aside. "Lucia, how long have you worked for him?" 10 years, Lucia replied. "Since before his father died." Then tell me honestly, is he a good man? Lucia paused, the question catching her off guard. He is a powerful man, she said at last. He's done terrible things, but I've seen him do good ones too. He's not cruel, just lost. Lost? Lucia nodded sadly. Men born into darkness often are. They spend their lives trying to hold on to whatever light they find. Sometimes that light is a person. The meaning wasn't lost on Isabella. She looked down at her hands, suddenly unsure if she could be anyone's light, especially his. Before she could ask more, one of Mateo's men appeared at the door, breathless. Lucia, the power's out across the east wing. Lucia frowned. That shouldn't happen. Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. The air suddenly felt wrong, heavy, charged. Downstairs, Mateo's phone buzzed again. A text message. Unknown number. You can't protect everyone, Santoro. He stared at it for a second before tossing the phone onto the desk and striding toward the door. He didn't get far. The moment he stepped into the hallway, a sharp crack split the air, the sound of shattering glass. A bullet tore through the window frame, splintering wood inches from his head. Get down! One of his guards shouted. Mateo ducked behind the marble column, pulling his gun from his holster. Where did it come from? East side, near the gardens. His blood ran cold. Isabella was upstairs, in the east wing. Cover me! He barked, sprinting toward the staircase. Isabella had heard the gunshot. It echoed through the villa like thunder. She froze, the tray of coffee cups slipping from her hands and shattering on the floor. Lucia grabbed her arm. Get away from the windows. What's happening? Isabella's voice trembled. Lucia didn't answer, just pulled her toward the hall. But before they could reach the door, two men burst in, faces masked, guns raised. Isabella screamed as Lucia shoved her behind the sofa. One of the men grabbed the older woman and threw her aside. Where is she? He shouted to the other. Search the rooms. They were coming for her. Mateo had been right. Isabella crouched low, her heart slamming against her ribs. The sound of boots echoed across the marble floor. She spotted the balcony door, half open. Her mind screamed run. She darted for it, slipping through just as one of the gunmen shouted. A bullet whizzed past, slamming into the railing. She stumbled down the steps into the garden, sprinting across the wet grass. Stop her! Another shot cracked through the air. She ducked, breath ragged, and ran toward the olive grove, where trees clustered thickly enough to hide her. Bella! The voice was Mateo's, sharp, commanding. Relief flooded her chest. He appeared from the opposite path, gun drawn, fury in his eyes. When he saw her, his expression shifted, from rage to pure, unguarded fear. Down, he shouted. She dropped instinctively. Mateo fired twice, 2 clean, controlled shots. Both intruders went down before they could reach her. The echo of the gunfire hung in the air like thunder. Then there was silence. Isabella trembled as he approached. His gun fell to his side, his other hand reaching for her face. Are you hurt? She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. No. But Lucia, she's alive, he said quickly. They won't touch her again. His voice was tight, hoarse with adrenaline. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel the tremor in his chest. I told you to stay inside, he whispered. I heard the shots, and you came running toward them? He pulled back, eyes blazing. You could have been killed. I couldn't just hide, she said, voice breaking. I couldn't do nothing. He stared at her for a long moment, breathing hard, then exhaled and cupped her face again. You're impossible. You're welcome, she whispered shakily. He almost laughed, a sound half relief, half exhaustion. Don't ever scare me like that again. I can't promise that, she said. The corners of his mouth twitched. Of course you can't. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Come inside. It's over. But as he led her back toward the villa, his eyes flicked toward the tree line, the place where the intruders had entered. It wasn't over, not yet, because he knew the Caruso family wouldn't send amateurs for a warning. They'd send killers for revenge. And the next time they came, it wouldn't just be to frighten him. It would be to finish the job. That night, Mateo didn't sleep. The villa was under lockdown. More guards, more weapons, more silence. From her room, Isabella could hear the constant echo of footsteps and murmured orders. Somewhere beyond her door, the air felt charged with war. Mateo stood alone in his study, staring at the bullet holes in the reports scattered across his desk. He didn't bother to clean up the blood spatter on his sleeve. It wasn't his, but it reminded him that this time, the violence had come too close. Luca entered quietly, holding a phone. "We found Sandro." Mateo's gaze snapped up. "Where?" "In the industrial quarter." "He's with them. They've set up a base near the river." "Bring the car," Mateo said. "Boss?" Luca hesitated. "You're not thinking straight. You can't storm in there alone. It's a trap." "I know," Mateo said, voice low and calm. "That's why I'm going." "Then at least let me come." Mateo nodded once. "Get ready." Upstairs, Isabella paced the length of her room. She could feel something shifting, like a storm building outside her window, one she couldn't stop. She'd seen him after the shooting. The way his hands didn't tremble, how his commands came sharp and certain. It scared her how natural he seemed in that chaos. Lucia brought her tea again, but Isabella barely touched it. "He's leaving, isn't he?" she asked quietly. Lucia's expression flickered, sympathy, and something close to fear. "You should rest, Signorina. Please, Lucia. I need to know." The older woman sighed. "He's going to end this one way or another. When a Santoro says that, it usually means someone won't be coming back." Isabella's throat tightened. "He can't keep doing this." "It'll destroy him." Lucia looked away. "Maybe that's the price he's willing to pay." When she left, Isabella sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the black card Mateo had given her weeks ago, the one that had once meant safety. Now it looked like a door to a world she couldn't escape. Her heart whispered that she loved him. Her mind screamed that loving him would be the end of her. The city was quiet when Mateo and Luca arrived at the docks. The moonlight rippled across the dark river like silver over steel. The warehouse ahead was old, its windows blacked out. 2 men guarded the door, Caruso's men. Mateo motioned to Luca. They moved silently, efficiently. 2 muffled shots later, the entrance was clear. Inside, the smell of oil and damp wood hung heavy. A single light flickered overhead, illuminating a figure tied to a chair. Sandro. Mateo's stomach clenched. Betrayal had a face now. "Boss," Sandro croaked when he saw him. "Please." "Don't," Mateo interrupted, his tone quiet but deadly. "Don't say my name like you still have the right." "I didn't mean for her to get hurt," Sandro gasped. "It was supposed to scare you. They promised no one would—" Mateo moved closer, the sound of his boots echoing. "You handed them her name. You brought the war to my doorstep." "I had no choice," Sandro cried. "They had my family." Mateo froze. For a split second, something flickered behind his eyes. Pity, or maybe understanding. "We all have family," he said softly. "And we all make choices." He stepped back, nodding to Luca. The next sound was final. Mateo turned away, jaw tight. "Burn it," he ordered. As they stepped out into the cold night air, Luca glanced at him. "What now? Now?" Mateo looked toward the horizon where the faintest light of dawn was breaking. "Now we make sure none of them ever touch what's mine again." When Mateo returned to the villa, the first thing he did was head upstairs. Isabella was waiting in the hallway, her eyes wide with exhaustion and worry. "You went after them, didn't you?" she asked. He didn't answer, but the blood on his collar said enough. "Mateo," her voice broke. "You can't keep doing this. You're bleeding for a life that's trying to swallow you whole." He stepped closer, his voice low. "And what would you have me do, Bella? Walk away and let them take everything I've built? Everything I love?" She flinched at that last word. "You call this love?" she whispered. "Killing people before breakfast, sleeping next to a gun?" "I call it survival," he said. "And survival is the only reason you're still alive." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't ask for this life." "I know." His expression softened, his voice breaking. "And if I could take it from you, I would." "Then let me go," she said. The silence that followed was deafening. He reached up, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I could," he whispered. "But I won't." "Why?" "Because you're the first thing in years that makes me want to be more than what I am." His honesty hit her like a physical force, the raw, unguarded truth of it. She hated how much it pulled her back toward him. He leaned his forehead against hers. You think I don't see what this does to you? I see it, and it kills me. But if I lose you, Bella, then none of this means anything. Her breath caught. And what if losing yourself means you lose me anyway? He didn't answer. He couldn't. The storm between them was silent but raging. Love and fear tangled so tightly they couldn't be separated. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Matteo, I don't want to be your weakness. He smiled sadly. Too late. That night she couldn't sleep again. From her window she watched Matteo standing in the courtyard below, lit by the pale moonlight. He looked like a statue carved from stone, still, unreachable, unbreakable. And yet she knew the truth now. He was breaking, not from his enemies, but from the weight of loving her in a world that would never let him have peace. 2 nights later, the city burned. Matteo had known it was coming. The quiet that settled over the streets was the kind that always came before blood. His men intercepted whispers, meetings at the docks, shipments rerouted, Caruso enforcers seen near the city's southern border. He had been at war long before the first gun fired, but that night they stopped whispering. That night they came for him. Isabella was in the conservatory, trying to distract herself by tending to Lucia's orchids. The radio hummed softly, an old Italian ballad drifting through the air. For a brief moment it felt almost normal. Then she saw the lights, harsh white beams cutting through the night from beyond the gates. She frowned. Lucia? Is someone arriving? Lucia's face went pale. Those aren't Matteo's cars. The words barely left her mouth before the first explosion hit. The sound shattered the night, a deep, violent roar that shook the villa. The windows blew inward, glass raining across the marble floor. Isabella fell to her knees, covering her head as screams erupted in the hallway. Get down! One of the guards shouted, rushing past. They're breaching the gate! Lucia grabbed Isabella's hand. Come, this way. They ran down the corridor, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Gunfire cracked in the distance, sharp, rhythmic, terrifying. The villa that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a trap. Lucia, Isabella gasped. Where's Matteo? Where he always is, Lucia said grimly. At the front. At the gates, Matteo stood in the pouring rain, his gun raised, his men forming a defensive line behind the stone walls. The headlights of approaching vehicles turned the driveway into a blinding battlefield. Luca crouched beside him. They've got numbers on us. Then we cut the head, Matteo said, eyes narrowing. Caruso's here. I can feel it. The gate blew open. Shadows spilled through. Armed men in black, faces covered. Matteo fired first. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the rain, flashes lighting up the night like lightning. Matteo moved with precision, each shot deliberate, his expression cold and unreadable. For every man who fell, another took his place. Then a scream pierced through the noise, Isabella's voice. Matteo froze. Inside, Isabella and Lucia had reached the service corridor, but one of the Caruso men had found them. He grabbed Lucia by the arm and shoved her aside, his gun trained on Isabella. Well, well, he sneered. The famous waitress. Didn't think the boss would risk all this for you. Isabella's pulse thundered in her ears. Her back hit the wall. Please, the man grinned. Don't worry, Bella. I won't hurt you much. Before he could take another step, a shadow appeared behind him. Fast, silent. Matteo. The sound of the gunshot was deafening. The man dropped instantly. Matteo grabbed Isabella, pulling her behind him. Are you hurt? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You shouldn't be here. This is my house, he said sharply. They came to my door. Lucia staggered up, clutching her arm. There's more outside. Matteo turned to one of his men who had followed him inside. Get them to the safe room, now. No, Isabella cried. I'm not hiding again. He turned to her, his voice breaking. Please, Bella, just this once. Let me fight without worrying I'll lose you. The pain in his tone silenced her. She nodded. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Brief, desperate. I'll find you when it's over. Then he was gone again, swallowed by the storm. The safe room was hidden behind a false wall in the wine cellar, cold, dim, and claustrophobic. The door sealed with a heavy click. Lucia sank to the floor, shaking. He'll be fine, she whispered. He always is. Isabella pressed her ear against the wall. The sound outside was muffled but relentless. Gunfire, shouting, the crack of breaking glass. Every sound felt like a heartbeat skipping, then suddenly silence. "Lucia?" she whispered. "Do you hear that?" Lucia looked up, eyes wide. "Stay where you are." The silence stretched too long. Isabella's breath came shallow. She couldn't stand it. She moved to the door, pressing her palm against the cold steel. "Matteo?" she whispered, even though she knew he couldn't hear her. The silence broke with an explosion so close the ground shuddered beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling. Lucia cried out, clutching her arm. The lights flickered, then went out. "Matteo!" Isabella screamed. She pounded on the door, panic taking over. "Please!" No answer. Only the echo of her own voice. Above them, Matteo was bleeding. He stood amid the smoke and wreckage of the main hall, his shirt torn, a cut across his forehead dripping crimson. The Caruso men were retreating, what was left of them. Luca dragged himself up beside him, limping. "They're falling back." "Not yet," Matteo said, his voice raw. "Where's Caruso?" Luca pointed through the haze. "There!" Through the broken glass doors, Matteo saw him. Enzo Caruso, older, heavier, but still smiling like a snake. He raised his gun. "Matteo Santoro!" Caruso called out, his voice echoing over the chaos. "Still pretending you're better than us. All this for a woman? A waitress?" Matteo raised his weapon. "For her, I'd burn every corner of this city." Caruso laughed. "Then let's burn it together." Both fired. The world narrowed to the flash of muzzle fire, the smell of smoke, the sound of shattering glass. When the dust settled, Caruso was on the ground. Matteo was still standing. Barely. He staggered backward, clutching his side. The pain was sharp, spreading fast. He pressed his hand against the wound, blood warm beneath his palm. "Boss!" Luca shouted, running to catch him. Matteo's voice was fading. "The safe room. Bella." Then his legs gave out. The last thing he heard was the sound of her name on his own lips before darkness swallowed him whole. When Isabella reached him, he was barely conscious. Lucia and 2 guards had forced the safe room door open after the shooting stopped. The villa smelled of smoke and metal, the floor streaked with blood. Isabella stumbled through the haze until she saw him. Matteo, lying near the broken fountain, his shirt soaked crimson. "Matteo!" she cried, dropping to her knees beside him. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Bella, don't talk," she whispered, pressing her hands against the wound. "You're going to be okay. The ambulance—" He gave a faint, pained smile. "No ambulance. No police." "You're bleeding." "I've bled before." His voice cracked. "Listen to me." She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "Don't you dare say goodbye. You don't get to save me and then leave me." He reached for her hand, his grip weak but steady. "If I don't make it, there's a safe behind the desk. Papers, accounts, everything you'll need to disappear. New name, new life. Promise me you'll use it." "Stop it," she sobbed. "You're going to make it. You promised you'd find me when it was over." He smiled faintly. "It's never over, Bella. Not for men like me." Her tears fell onto his chest. "Then I'll stay until it is." He closed his eyes for a moment, and for one terrifying second, she thought he was gone. Until she felt his hand tighten weakly around hers. "I never believed in fate," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Until the night I saw you dancing." She bent down, pressing her forehead to his. "Then dance with me now," she whispered. "Just one more time." He managed a soft laugh, breathless, broken, beautiful. Always. She kissed him, the first real kiss since that night in the cafe, the one that had changed everything. It wasn't perfect or graceful. It was desperate and trembling, a kiss that carried every word they didn't have time to say. When she pulled back, his eyes were still open, and in them, she saw peace for the first time. "Stay with me," she whispered. "I'm trying," he said, a faint smile curving his lips. "For you. I'll try." Then the world blurred into sirens, shouting, and the cold press of hands pulling her away. He survived. Barely. The doctor said it was a miracle. The bullet had missed his heart by an inch. For weeks he drifted in and out of consciousness, and Isabella refused to leave his side. She slept in a chair beside his hospital bed, her fingers always resting over his. When he finally opened his eyes for good, the first thing he saw was her. "You're still here," he murmured. "Where else would I go?" she whispered. Matteo healed slowly, but the empire he'd built did not. He dismantled it piece by piece, closed the gambling fronts, sold the clubs, walked away from the men who once called him boss. He'd spent a lifetime controlling others. Now, for the first time, he wanted to control only himself. When he was strong enough to walk again, he sold the villa and moved into a small house near the sea, far from the city, far from everything that once defined him. And Isabella went with him. 5 years later, the cafe was alive again. Not the old one, that had been rebuilt on a new street, brighter, more open. The sign above the door read, Café de Luz, Café of Light. Inside, morning sun filtered through tall windows, and the smell of espresso and sugar filled the air. Customers laughed, music played softly, and behind the counter Isabella moved gracefully, humming to herself. Her hair was a little shorter now, her eyes a little wiser. A silver ring glimmered on her finger as she served coffee with the same gentle smile that once caught a stranger's attention in the dark. That stranger sat in the corner booth reading a newspaper. His once dark hair now carried faint streaks of gray, but his eyes were the same stormy steel, softer now, no longer shadowed by power. Matteo Santoro, or, as the papers now called him, Matteo Rossi. The man who once ruled a city now spent his mornings reading beside the woman who had taught him peace. When she brought him his espresso, he looked up and smiled. "You're late," he said. She rolled her eyes. "You own the place. You can pour it yourself." "But then I'd miss watching you work," he said, reaching for her hand. She squeezed his fingers lightly. "You still watch me dance sometimes, don't you?" He smirked. "Every night." They shared a quiet moment. No fear, no walls, just the kind of silence that feels like home. Outside, the sea breeze swept through the open doors, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. Lucia entered with a basket of flowers, smiling warmly. "You two, always flirting in front of customers." Matteo laughed softly. "They'll get used to it." He turned back to Isabella. "Do you ever regret it? The night you didn't stop dancing?" She thought about it. The cafe, the rain, the danger, the choices that changed everything. Then she shook her head. "No," she said softly, "because that was the night I stopped surviving and started living." Matteo reached across the table, brushing his thumb along her cheek. "And the night I stopped being a monster." Her smile was tender. "You were never a monster, Matteo. Just a man who forgot what love looked like." He kissed her hand, eyes never leaving hers. "Then I suppose you reminded me." They sat together as the morning light filled the cafe, the world outside moving on. Unaware that the man once feared by all of Rome now found joy in something as simple as laughter and coffee shared across a table. And sometimes, after the doors closed and the music played softly again, Isabella still danced, slow, graceful, lost in the rhythm of her own freedom. Matteo would watch from his chair, the same way he had that first night, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips, because he knew deep down that love, real love, wasn't about power or control. It was about surrender, and in the end, it wasn't the world that tamed him. It was the girl who danced alone,